Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the May 22nd, 2018 VOLTA call. Today we have a few agenda topics to go over. I do want to remind everyone that we are recording the session so we can post it later to the VOLTA playlist on YouTube. Please keep that in mind during any presentations and discussion. And with that, I'll quickly go over our planned agenda for today. It'll be fairly tight on the schedule. First, we're going to be going over a proposal to create a formal TST for VOLTA as follow-up from a discussion that was in the Dallas lockdown. And then we have an ad since I sent this out yesterday, and that's a brief discussion of the request for a 1.4 release at the end of Sprint 2. Then we'll have an open OLT demo and then a presentation on profile management from Mike from AT&T. So with that, let me hand it over to Bill for the discussion about the proposal for the creation of a formal TST.
Thanks, Julie. Hopefully everybody's seen the proposal was sent around, but if not, I'll just quickly summarize that. So it's a best practice to have a technical steering team for an open source project, a place where a diverse technical opinions can be kind of brought to the table, discussed, and have decisions made. And we've actually done a pretty good job of that in VOLTA, I would say. And but on the other hand, VOLTA is going to continue to grow, and I think that the opinions will become more diverse. And before we get into a situation where we aren't able to effectively make decisions the way we want to, the goal of ONF is to get a TST in place. And the responsibilities of the TST are pretty standard. It's really approving technical projects, making sure that they're in alignment with the technical direction of the project. It's approving proposals from the community, we call collaborators, or from other members and partners. And also to provide some oversight on the release management when we do releases and what the content is and so forth. And what we're proposing is we start with a group of 5 in the TST, and we would seat it with 3 members from the founding companies, ONF, CN, and AT&T. And then what we would do is we'd ask for nominations for 2 additional people, and those nominations can come from anybody in the community. And we'll put that up to a vote, and there will be a voting community that's put together. And the people who will be on the voting list are those who have been active in the community over the last year. And active meaning they've made contributions to code base or the documentation, or been active in various roles like Scrum Master. And that will all be transparently created and sent out for approval, and we'll give it time for it to settle in and make sure that we've got as many people as are out there and who want to be on the voting list. And then I've made some proposals for when people would get reelected so that we could stagger. We wouldn't have all 5 people coming up for reelection at the same time. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions you have.
So the TST, they don't have regular meetings, right? Or that's among the TST team itself, they will decide, what's the meeting.
So I think that the TST would want to have some regular meetings to be able to engage the community and be transparent on decisions that are being made and direction being set. But it would be up to them as to how often they want to meet. Okay.
I guess what's the difference between those meetings versus these market meetings, right? Why not just turn it into
We have a TST call that we do.
Because it's cold here.
We already have a TST call, but yeah, we were sort of merging them together. So potentially, because Julie have we. Anyway.
So I agree that this is a large portion TST type material, but I think there's also a lot of project-oriented material that goes in here.
Yeah. It's a mix of kind of Scrum between planning and TSP.
So maybe you split this meeting into halves, or, you know, if you have topics that are TSP specific, and start kind of organizing it that way.
But TST meeting, it's not just for the TST voting members, right? So
No, it's
everybody.
a public meeting,
Okay. So I think, so what we probably do need to just, people start nominating, and at the same time, we create a voting committee.
Yeah, so after this, meeting, if we agree to do this, then I'll start the process of creating a voting community, and I'll send out, you know, a starter list, and then ask for additional people to be put on that, and I'll also start a nomination process after, for people to nominate for the TST.
Okay, so Julie and I, we probably don't need to do too much.
No, I'll take care of it, and then, I'll also put together a schedule for the, voting, and I'll run the voting, tool to go through that.
Okay. Anybody has any question, comments, or, I think we talked about this during the Dallas lockdown, so I'm glad to see we have a formal establishment on this one. And I guess one other thing is potentially other service providers, if they want to also have their own project, product owner for different areas, they can also nominate the multiple product owners within the same project, right?
Okay, so, you're actually kind of mixing a couple of different things. So there's a TST, which is the overall VOLTA project, and then for in O&F terminology, we have actually TLT that sits above all of the TSPs and all these projects, right, and sets technical direction. And the TLT will also prioritize setting up reference design teams. And reference design teams are organized around operator groups. So there's an operator that wants to bring VOLTA out to production in some certain form, right? There may be another operator group that wants to do it a little bit differently, right? And for that, different operator group, they would have a product owner like yourself that would be responsible for the priorities and the types of features that are in that, right? And would set up a project to bring VOLTA into production in the manner that they would like to do so.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
I guess the question I have is, how do we know which kinds of things need to be decided by the TST and which kind of things are below that level? I think that hasn't been clear on us in court in the past.
Yeah, it's a good question. Probably a good thing once we get a TST formed for the TST to kind of come up with a proposal, right? And
yeah, this feels like there should be some sort of more formal certification of what kind of decisions need to be voted on by the TST.
And I guess what kind of skill sets are desired for the TST members also? So
the because it's all technical nature, right? We want people that are most technically involved in the details of the project. Ideally, I'd say it's people that are very active in creating the code base, but it doesn't have to be. There's lots of people with very strong architectural skills and technical issues of bringing things to deployment. So I think it's really within the community to decide, you know, what the right mix of people in the TST is.
Okay, do we have any other questions for Bill today on this topic?
I guess when would this be in effect, or when's the plan for it to exist, I guess?
So I think it'll take us a couple of weeks to put together a voting list and to start with the nomination process, and then we'll probably leave a couple of weeks for getting through a voting process. So I'd say probably won't happen for a month. So somewhere around 4 or 5 weeks.
All right, any other questions? Okay, Bill, thank you for that. And then it sounds like there will be some more discussion, most likely over email. And then you'll touch base with the community when you are getting ready to kick off the voting process. So I think we'll move on to the next topic. So this one is just meant to be a quick heads up for the group for an issue that was brought up. So Sean, I'll let you talk about it briefly. And so this was a discussion, a request for 1.4 release to be cut at the end of Sprint 2.
Right, so we also mentioned about this in a couple of weeks now, because the core release 6.0 will be released in sometime the mid of June, I believe. So the VOLTHA will become part of the software deliverables within the core integration. So, and 1.4 also have the plain, it will include the basic function of the OpenOOT. So the OpenOOT will be officially part of the 1.4 release. That's why we didn't use 1.3.1. We actually think 1.4 will be much better category for it. And then another major software will be in the 1.4 is the Telefonica submission of the Celestica OOT and ONT software. So the proposal is let's branch that out, tag and branch out at the end of the Sprint 2 of the 2.0. I'll work with Jono and other people, Steve, who's going to do the tagging and branching. Any concern from the community regarding to branching out 1.4 for the core release 6.0? And of course, we need to provide a documentation also.
Is there any code in the master branch right now that's 2.0 specific that doesn't belong in the 1.4 release?
I hope not.
Yeah, that could be a bit of a problem. That was kind of.
I mean, as far as I know, there's nothing sort of 2.0 specific that would prevent us from doing a 1.4 release. I think the big things that would break APIs are going to be the containerization of adapters and the reworking of the core. But I don't think any code has been submitted on that yet.
Ken, is there something going to be submitted in the 2.0 will make out something?
No, there's none. Not at this time.
And the OpenOMCI chip, is this something will be? I don't think that the OpenOMCI framework will create too much trouble, right? So.
Yeah, it shouldn't have any trouble for, I guess, the Adtran adapter, since that's what I'm directly working with. But we want to make sure because it's being put into the Broadcom adapter, that it gets proper testing. But it's something that shouldn't conflict with it, but we need to make sure of that.
Okay.
What is the date for the end of Sprint 2?
For
the end of Sprint 2?
This week is the first week, so we've got 3 weeks, right? So basically, Julie, when's the end of Sprint?
It goes through June 8th.
June 8th.
Okay.
When do we expect to make the 1.4 release branch?
The request was for the end of Sprint 2.
Sorry,
Didn't talk about the branch.
I just thought align them together, but if we want to cut it early, if the 1.4 is ready to be released, we can cut it anytime, maybe end of this week or next week.
Yeah, the point being we have to make sure that, again, is not only do we not have any code in right now that is 2.0 specific, but also until that branch is cut, that we don't have any code that goes 2.0 specific. It also might mean, because of the phase of development we're in, we're going to have to do some double edits between a 1.4 release branch as well as the master branch in terms of bug fixes.
I think I missed it. What's driving 1.4? Who needs 1.4?
Core 6.0. Yeah.
And then,
The 6.0 releases in June 15, but we don't want to rely on VOLTHA 1.3 because that doesn't include a lot of the open OLT stuff. So I guess we can have them figure out exactly what OpenOLT stuff, if there's anything else that needs to come in 1.4. If there isn't, then we could do it soon, like this week or next week.
Okay.
And then that would mean master could proceed with whatever we want to put on master.
Okay.
Okay.
So
And
basically,
we're running a bit over, so we can continue discussion on Thursday. I think probably we can also continue it over VOLTHA Discuss, but we do need to get on to our next agenda topic fairly quickly here. So any other quick comments on this? Otherwise, I think we should follow up Sean and Jono and David and others with some more discussion over VOLTHA Discuss, and then on Thursday's call as well, probably. Thoughts?
okay.
Okay, last call for questions on that before I hand it over to Shad for the OpenOLT adapter demo. Okay, Shad, are you ready for me to give you presentation rights?
Okay. You know where I press start?
Yeah.
Okay. More screens.
Well, if you can do it on, you can do it on ATT, because I can do it on here.
Yeah. Hi, folks. So I don't have much time, so I'll get into the demo right away. And as things are starting up, as things are taking time to start up, I'll do a bit of talking here. So I have an OLT connected with 4 ONUs, 3 alpha and 1 Broadcom, and this is they're showing up in VOLTHA over here. And I have in almost 1 subscriber provision. I have a small setup in my lab, so I have so I'm running 1 subscriber here. I have the Broadcom ONU connected to a client, and it's doing a ping across the client ONU OLT to a server on the NNI. So I'm going to bring up things from scratch over here. Bring down VOLTHA, bring down ONOS. So as people who have been working on this know, the OLT, there's 2 executables that start on the OLT. One is the base Broadcom SDK. That's what I've just started. The other is the OpenOLT driver. And I'm bringing up VOLTHA and bringing up ONOS. So, and pre-provision the OLT, and the type is OpenOLT, and the IP address of the OLT, and enable it. So this VOLTHA started, the OLT is pre-provisioned and enabled, and it's waiting for the OLT to come up, and this will take a couple of minutes over here. In the meantime, bring up ONOS. So it doesn't see anything yet. So this will take a couple of minutes to start up. What we've done is we started OLT, both the executables on the OLT, started VOLTHA, started ONOS. And while we are waiting for it, let me go through a couple of slides over here, some talking points. So this is the high-level view. The OpenOLT adapter sits in VOLTHA.
Hey, Shad, could you also explain where the time is being taken as well as you go through this?
The time taken for?
Yeah, so the startup is a couple of minutes you mentioned. Where is that? What takes 2 minutes?
This is the OLT coming up. If I had started the OLT before on, so VOLTHA could connect immediately. But here the OLT is coming up. It's it's basically the SDK initializing and the interface is coming up. And so
you rebooted it? Is that it? Okay.
Yeah, restarted it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
So you see over here the SDK. I mean, it's initializing the chip. So this could have been done earlier. This could have been done before. I mean, the OLT could have been up and running, and if you had started VOLTHA and pre-provision, it would connect immediately.
Okay, thanks.
So the OpenOLT adapter and the OpenOLT driver. The OpenOLT adapter is we're trying to design it in such a way that it's pretty generic and agnostic of the details of the actual chip level details and things like that. So hopefully, if there's a new white box, even if it's not Maple based, we should be able to kind of reuse or adapt this OpenOLT adapter to a new white box. Okay, so things have started over here. So we're seeing the SDK initialized, the VOLTHA is connected, and we see the devices. And we see them all active right now. So we have one Broadcom, 3 alphas over here. Now if we see a ports over here, we see the ONU show up as ports. The port names show the serial numbers of the ONUs. And if you see over here, our ping has stopped, and we do an add subscriber on the logical device for the Broadcom, which is port 64. And it takes about 10 seconds for actually the flow to get provision. And you see over here the ping started over here. So this is basically the demo here. Now what I'm not demoing is EAPOL and DHCP, which also we've got it working. Jono's done the end-to-end tying up all the ends and testing of that. So I'm not demoing that over here, and hopefully we can demo it next time, or we have an internal demo for that. So this is basically about it. I wanted to keep it short, and this is the kind of the roadmap or timeline of the development. We started working on this in Feb. March, we had an internal demo with a single ONU, no EAPOL or DHCP. April, we had multiple ONUs on a single pawn working. And this is basically what I'm demoing to you guys right now. And also, we've done a demo for AT&T Foundry a couple of weeks back. Luca from ONF has done a lot of work on packaging this thing. So we now have the driver building from a Jenkins job, and that can be kicked off with with each check-in, and that can be a base for actually running actual testing, automated testing. In May, we had EAPOL DHCP working end-to-end. Jono's done that piece over there, and we have the AT&T Foundry guys chipping in over here for the ONU and OLT management, which is ONU disable, enable, reboot, OLT, enable, disable. And going forward, in the next sprints, we have a lot of work cut out for us. Multiple pawns, multiple OLTs. Configuration management is a big piece because we don't have XPawn over here. We need to bring in something that does configuration management, FCAPs, alarms and PMs, and of course HA, and HA for a standalone restartability and for the cluster.
Before we go too far, could you go back to the add subscriber call? I just want to look at that a bit more and understand that, what's going on here. Maybe I'm missing something.
So one thing to realize is that the add subscriber call, as Shad is showing over here, it's a stopgap measure. Eventually, when the full bottom-up flow will be ready, once ONAS gets the serial number, it should be able to figure out if the serial number is allowed in the network, and then go through the normal process of EAPOL or DHCP authentication and automatic VLAN assignment. So since that part is not there yet, that's what Shad is doing to do a manual add subscriber.
So that is enabling port 64, is what you're telling me there from that device?
And also
pushing the tagging flows into the device. The flows that match on the UNI in port and tag the two VLANs and then send out the NNI port and vice versa. The port is already enabled before this call, and EAPOL traffic would be able to be trapped at the OLT, but this is adding the VLAN, the data plane flows that tag the VLANs.
It pretty much simulates what the very end of EAPOL in AAA does.
Yeah,
that's right.
And there's also commands similar like that for IGMP, so you can do a lot of testing without actually having full data.
So I worry about testing being integrated into the CLI like this and then becoming part of a standard process. And I mean, if it's really for test, I don't know.
Yeah, this is for test.
Yeah, but I understand that, but because it is surfaced as part of the CLI, people are going to start using it as part of the CLI, and we've essentially done some. It's all well and good to think it's temporary, but it has things that are said to be temporary sometimes have a way to find permanence, and
I wouldn't call this temporary. This is
well, we will still need a top-down flow as well, and that's part of what I'm going to start talking about here in a minute, I guess, is some of the things that we see that we need from a top-down type of service flow provisioning. That won't be the end-all, be-all. There will be some bottom-up, but there is somewhere that these two things have to meet, and that's kind of what I was going to start talking about here in this next presentation.
I also just worry about
but
the concept of subscribers leaking their way into VOLTHA. I guess this is an ONOS, not VOLTHA, isn't it? So it's a little better.
Yeah. So yes.
Yeah, and this is going to have to change as we move to 2.0 as well, right? We need to be able to at least specify the technology profile, etc. Right? I mean,
yeah, the technology profile part is not here yet. I think Jonah was also trying to say something.
No. Yeah, I mean, these flows will have to reference the correct meters that describe the technology.
Right.
The flows that get pushed down will have to change.
So this is essentially just adding to the AAA app, adding an access record.
And this is a call to the OLT app. And it's
the OLT app?
Adding VLAN flows. But this is something that's been there for a very long time, for 2 or 3 years, right? So it's not like we just had it temporarily. This is part of the mechanism of adding the data plane flows.
Yeah, just hadn't seen this kind of sequence before.
No automation will come on top, and it will call the same mechanism. But I see the automation is kind of tying the pieces together. It'll still use this mechanism, but it will just be done automatically rather than manually through the CLI.
Can you do a show flows? See how many flows right now in there?
So you have flows. So obviously you don't see EAPOL because EAPOL is not happening here. You have the EAPOL flows.
EAPOL basically that's the
default
management. That's default.
Yeah, that's default that happens in any case, even if EAPOL does. So the VLAN ID 4 is your data flows over here. Upstream and downstream, EAPOL upstream and downstream. You have those EAPOL flows for each of the
ONT, right?
Yeah. So you have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 over here. And what else is that?
So the ones at the top are IGMP flows. The IP proto 2 is trapping IGMP.
These over here.
Yeah.
So we have 4 of these for the 4
check.
ONUs. Four IGMP flows for the 4 ONUs, 4 EFO flows. So they're not downstream, upstream. There's 1 flow for each. That's the trap. 4 EFO flows and a data flow over here. Data flow is both upstream and downstream. 129 to 64 and 64 to 129.
There's a VLAN ID 3. What is that?
So one is
That's the SLAN.
one is the SVLAN and one is the CVLAN.
Yeah. So 4 is CVLAN. And then,
4 is the CVLAN.
And then as I remember, all 4 units, everybody's sharing the same CVLAN right now. Okay.
So we can have different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they share the SVLAN, but we can have different C tags for each one.
Okay.
Okay, and so we're about out of time. Any other quick comments or questions before we change to our next topic?
Yeah, I had a really quick one. I guess currently both the Edge Core and the OpenOLT uses inter-adapter messages to communicate back and forth to ONUs, but I think that sort of tightly couples everything together. Do we want to make that the official way to bring up ONUs, or should we do it a different way? We might want to discuss that later.
You mean the ONUs, the ONU, you mean the OMCI messaging?
Yeah,
tightly coupling of ONUs over here. The ONUs are handled by the Broadcom ONU adapter, which is common, which is.
Yeah, but right now the Broadcom ONU is tightly coupled with the Edge Core and OpenOLT.
Right.
And using the proprietary inter-adapter messages, unless we standardize that, that might have some issues with compatibility in the future. And like on our ADTRAN, we actually come up without actually having to use any kind of inter-adapter message capability. And it decouples the ONU and the OLT device adapters pretty well.
I absolutely agree with Dave. The OpenOLT adapter is tightly coupled with the Broadcom ONU adapter through the inter-adapter messages. I think that coupling has to be broken. That is definitely a work item, and I think that goes along with the Broadcom ONU adapter changes that we will have to plan, which includes the OMCI messaging as well. I mean, it's not really coupled with the OMCI, with moving to the OMCI library, but definitely there's work on the Broadcom ONU adapter to be done as well.
Okay, yeah. I've been talking with Don and a few others at the Foundry on that. So perhaps we can get a meeting sometime later and go into this in more detail.
Yeah, I will be interested in that effort as well.
Okay.
I agree.
So, yeah, I'm done.
Okay, and Mike, if you're ready, I will give you a presentation, right?
Sharing my PowerPoint now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. All right. So, so what we're going to talk about this week is kind of, as I was kind of mentioning before, how do I tie an upstream management request API for kind of a top-down provisioning model into some of the lower layer stuff, maybe to the top of some of the ONO stuff. I'm not specifying in this procedure where to tie it in, but we talked about last week or before Tom went, we talked about having a management app that could be a container, a separate management container that would be providing FCAPS types of functions, Yang models or whatever. As we're coming into this week, we're kind of moving into the realm of things that don't really exist very well in standardized Yang models. We think that a Yang model can be developed to do the things that we need to do, but it doesn't really fit into a 383 or a 385 or any of those detailed Yang models. And what we're trying to do is kind of map into abstract concepts of providing service. And we talked just a second ago about having to tie in with technology profiles, and I'm going to provide hopefully a way to do that here with a top-down model and tie into the dynamic nature of device IDs and ONT IDs and those types of things, and kind of be a bridge from an abstract model into a more concrete VOLTHA model in the management application, the management container that we kind of talked about a week or so ago. So one of the first ideas that I'm going to present here is the idea of a service type. And this is really to give operators the way of defining their own kind of classes of service, and what this can get to and what this can be used for is to possibly differentiate between different technology profiles that might need to be used. In one case, I might have a 3Q 1 gem port model. In another case, I might have an 8Q, 8 gem port model or whatever. And if my services really need to be differentiated in the technology types of profiles, how do I define that from an operator's point of view? And how do I not try to just code all that into VOLTHA and then have to code upstream? So the idea that I'm going to present here is that we dynamically can create a service type. This might be, and it's just a tag. It's a tag that says I'm going to create, here's residential service, here's business service, here's very fancy high priority business service. So the operator has the ability to come in and say, I want to define the different types of services that I'm going to be configuring onto VOLTHA. And they're basically based completely on the requirements. The next step would then be is to come down and talk about how do I manage profiles. So the next piece would be I need to tie the details of a technology profile into a usage type that can be used upstream. And I looked at the how do we add profiles in. I looked at the wiki page that had been done for technology profiles, and it seemed very straightforward. But we also need the ability from an external point to be able to add that in from an external point. And so this type of API, I would envision, at least from an AT&T operations point of view, is this would be something that an operator that not an OSS. This is not an OSS interface. This is more kind of a technology support interface, where technology support would come in and maybe an architecture team would develop a new technology profile that says, here's all my queues, here's all my gem ports, here's all my configurations. This is what we want our technology profile to be, and they would hand that off to the operations team, and the operations team would have the responsibility of coming into VOLTHA and adding this new technology profile. And obviously, this technology profile would have to exist. It would have to create an ID that would be there, that would be associated with it, and it would be applicable to an adapter type. It could be the OpenOLT adapter, it could be a Tibit adapter, it could be an EdgeCore adapter. The profile would be directly related to that specific type of technology. You would want to be able to provide the key value pairs of the data that goes into the technology profile. And then what I'm saying here for the service type is basically coming down and saying this technology profile is going to be the profile I use for residential service. So I'm going to map this particular set of key value pairs, this particular set of things for this particular type of adapter, and this is going to be my residential service profile. This is going to be my business service profile. This is going to be my extra special whiz-bang super business service profile. And so I tie that relationship into a generic concept that an OSS is going to know about. An OSS is going to know about, I want to make some business service, and I want to make it on a particular entity. And we'll talk about doing the service profile coming down.
So
but the idea here is to.
I got a question. So originally when we talked about the technical profiles, we differentiated on technology, not adapter type. And here you brought out specifically adapter type. Well,
and if adapter type is the wrong word, it's more. I mean, maybe it's pivot versus edge. Maybe it's not adapter. Maybe it's more technology. Maybe this is technology type. Maybe I just changed this to say technology type.
Okay, and the other question. That's fine. The other question is you talked about bringing kind of service types names, business versus residential. Do you see that kind of construct filtering all the way down into VOLTHA, or do you still see that above kind of VOLTHA, and VOLTHA still remains kind of we have IDs, but it doesn't know that there's a thing called the business profile or residential profile?
I think this service type comes into this management app, and I think this management app has some level of persistence. And if we want to say that this management app is on top of VOLTHA, I'm okay with saying that. If maybe this business app, maybe this management app is on top of ONOS or the ONOS apps, or maybe this is part of ONOS. Or I mean, I think this is an API that needs to get implemented in the pod, and it needs to be inside the compute and running software that's running inside the pod, and it is providing the upstream interface for how do I configure services into the pod. Because what I would like to be able to do is just have and we'll see in a second on the service call, is just have I want to make a service request on this particular device, on this particular port, on this particular ONT, with this particular service type, residential, and this particular speeds, and just have it be a very generic interface. Not that anybody upstream needs to know that I've got technology profiles and I've got IDs, or I've got these different types of adapters, and if I have to have this other type of, not adapter, but technology, if I've got pivot, I've got to use this number, but if I've got edge core, I've got to use this other number. I want to hide all of that from the upstream. So whether you call it inside of VOLTHA, or you call it inside the management app, or if it's inside of ONOS, or it becomes part of NEMS, that NEMS is starting to come up and talk about NEMS. I think it's a management interface for configuring services, and it's a management interface to provide new technology profiles.
Okay.
In a high level way, tie that in with the low level details of VOLTHA.
And I think that makes sense, and I understand it. I guess I'm trying to differentiate where the boundary lines are, right? Is this a NEM thing, and that's great, or is this a VOLTHA thing? I'm not saying the solution doesn't need it, because I think the solution does need it. The question is kind of where the boundaries are and where things exist, and that's kind of what I'm kind of debating, at least in my own head, and trying to figure out how that fits.
Yeah, and I suggest we'll let. Sorry, Sean, go ahead.
So what does it mean for an adapter to say, okay, this is a residential service versus a business service? Is there
not
anything?
For the adapter. It's not for the adapter to know. The adapter just knows the adapter. Whatever the adapter is going to get a profile ID. So the adapter, whenever and I think it'll come through. I think it'll come through in the next set of slides.
Okay.
What the adapter sees. The adapter never sees residential or whatever. This is used here in this management app to and let's take a step further. There's I think 2 more slides till I get there. But so here's a way to add technology profiles and associate them with service types. So my next step is speed profiles. So I think that there is a need for as well as a technology profile as for the need for the idea of a speed profile. And I believe that the speed profile is much more detailed than a service request would come in. I mean, a service request is going to be, I want residential 100. Well, residential 100 is going to be setting some, in PON, it's going to be setting the metering values and very, very specific detailed metering values and all the bits and bytes. And let me calculate the overhead that I need to make a speed test. And, you know, it's 101, 537 or whatever, or it's, you know, it's 132, 514. All of those details is not what OSS needs to deal with. But the idea here of a speed profile is, let me set up all the metering values that I need. Maybe for business, I have 3 metering values, and I have an assured, and I have a min and a max and everything. And maybe for residential, I only set 2 metering values. But the idea here is on a speed profile, I can create the additional things of what are the metering parameters for PON that might be needed to achieve a service. I can also see this as a future implementation for G.fast is maybe for a different type of technology that needs to actually change the way the line syncs based on the speed it's going to perform. Maybe there are actual things that need to be happening differently in the hardware that is more like technology profile code, but we don't want to, it's not the gem ports, it's not the this, it's not the that, it's not the other. It's more physical operations that are related to speed that could be differentiated on a service request type of basis. Obviously, this is a very future thing, but it's just the idea here is that I want to separate out speed from service, from technology profile. We separate it out here, and we have possibly the ability that, depending on what type of technology you're doing, you might have, so for PON right now, what we're talking about, let's set up the meters. Let's have the meters set up exactly the way we need them set up in the downstream and the upstream direction, and provide that detail here for PON. That's basically what I'm saying right now. This is setting the meters. In the future, it might be something more, and that's why I put it in here. And again, this is not adapter type. This is technology type. So I have some profiles that are technology profiles we've talked about today. I have some speed profiles, which is kind of a new concept that may only reside in this management app. That the management app may be the only thing that really knows about that. And then as I come down to do a service request, what does a service request look like? So a service request will come down and it will identify an ONT, and we talked on the previous representation about assigning a particular name to a particular OLT. Could be a silly, could just be a name. So I'm gonna specify an OLT. This service management app would then be able to use that to go find what the logical IDs are, what the logical names are, all the different details of the dynamic information inside of either ONOS or inside of VOLTHA, in order to properly identify who that is inside of the VOLTHA world. But to the upstream, it's just a simple name. I want to do it on a port, on a specific port on that device, and then I want to do it on a specific ONT. And again, this ONT was registered previously in the management app. It's been assigned a serial number, or maybe it hasn't. This could be a pre-provisioning service flow where maybe even a serial number hasn't been assigned to that ONT, and I really want to provide service. But I do know that I have a number. I have ONT number 3, and so I'm trying to put service on ONT number 3. So there's a lot of dynamic nature. There's a lot of dynamic nature of the bottom-up approach that may not necessarily have been established yet. That pre-provisioning is possibly coming down from OSSs. We talked with our OSS people in AT&T, and they said, yeah, we definitely have pre-provisioning cases before we even go roll out a truck and put an ONT and assign a serial number and all that kind of stuff. So this management app would be responsible for saying, okay, I'm accepting that this service is going to go on this OLT, and I'm accepting that this service is going to go on this ONT, but maybe they don't exist yet. So I'm going to have to just wait until I get a notification from ONOS or VOLTHA that those things have arrived.
So Mike, just one clarification on that. So the ONT number. Now, the ONT number is assigned to a subscriber record, right? That doesn't necessarily need to match the ONU ID assigned on the PON.
Exactly. Right? Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This is what I tried to talk to you. This is what I tried to talk about a week or so ago, saying with the ONT management part is I'm going to assign it a number, and it doesn't have to be the ONT ID that's on the PON, but it is the number that I know. And I want to assign that and have this management app be the one that makes that translation and makes that, it has the awareness of what the dynamic details of what's going on down in VOLTHA or ONOS or however. And then as well, we pass in, an SVLAN assignment, a CVLAN assignment, because we've got to match that up with the possibility of an external BNG that is getting configured at the same time. And so this, from the top-down approach, we're going to do that. I couldn't squeeze this all on one page, so we flipped to the final page, and now I lost the bullet there somehow. We have the service type that comes down. So as the service type comes down, I don't know why I lost that bullet. I had a sub bullet under service type. This service type, so with the OLT identification and the ONT identification, we have really tied ourselves to knowing which adapter we're going to use and actually which technology we're going to use. So we have been able to figure out, because once we have real hardware behind what those provision parameters are, we know which technology we're going to use and which adapter we're going to use. And we now, on service type, whenever that comes down, residential or business, I can now pick the technology profile that I'm going to use in order to configure this service. So I now have the ability to pick this technology profile and apply it. And subsequently, the same way with the speed profiles, I can set my meters the way I need to set them in the downstream and upstream direction, and I can pull all that together and tie that generic upstream information into a very specific, detailed configuration that needs to go into VOLTHA. And so I'm trying to tie a very abstract model into the bridge is this management application, the bridge into all of the details that might be going on within ONOS or VOLTHA in order to achieve this service. Excuse me. I want to go back and touch on one point that may not have been absolutely clear in the technology profile in the idea of a service type. So if AT&T has defined their basic technology profile for a specific Tibit adapter or not adapter but technology, they've assigned their technology profile, and they find that they need to update the technology profile, then part of updating the technology profile would mean that I potentially want to go through my network and re-push my technology. I want to push those changes to the devices in my network, and presumably you would come down possibly you might orchestrate up at a much higher level. How do I move that through my network? But at some point you would need to come down to a VOLTHA instance and this management application that is there, and you would say, oh, here are the new values of the technology profile that I want you to use, and I want you to push those down to the subscribers that are potentially using that profile. In the same way, if I just decided to put a new technology profile down there and I switched and I said, okay, residential service is no longer going to be using technology profile, the first one I put down there, it's now going to be using technology profile, the second one I put down there. In other words, maybe I create a new technology profile and then I assign it the service type residential. Again, that would also imply that I need to now use this technology profile for residential service on this particular technology. Therefore, I want to push down, again, the information to those, to the details, because I've now said, no, my technology profile needed to change, and now I want to use these parameters. So this profile management concept provides a concept of, let's put some new things down there and let's assign them to service types, but it also provides the ability of, oh, I might also need to change what's down there, and I might need to push that into my running configuration and update them.
Yeah, so I think we kind of talked before, and I think if you change a service profile, it's going to be service affecting, right? So, and we I understand that, but I mean, but if you have a problem and you need to do that, you would schedule a maintenance windows presumably and step through that as an operator. I mean, if you need to make the change and it's service affecting, then as an operator, it's our responsibility to say, okay, well, we're going to do that on a certain number of VOLTHA instances in a 8-hour maintenance window, and we're going to step through those and make sure that those come back properly and that service is restored in a maintenance window. And so, yeah, this would not be something that you would want to do ad hoc. Right. So, I mean, this would be something that would be managed.
And you talked about a rolling upgrade there, service profiles too. That's something that we haven't walked through either, even at the VOLTHA level. Being able to have a single instance, of VOLTHA managing multiple areas, or distributed VOLTHAs, if you will, and how you do rolling upgrades of the profiles there. If that's going to be a requirement, that needs to be pulled in and understood.
Yeah, because we do. Also
I was addressing more the scope of a pod at a time. So I wasn't trying to go above a pod at a time. So I mean, this being a pod, there might be some number of instances of VOLTHA inside the pod, managing some number of OLTs. We can decide in that particular pod if there's an instance of this management application per VOLTHA instance, or if there's a single management instance in that pod for all VOLTHA instances. I wasn't necessarily trying to specify that here. I was just more thinking of this being kind of in the pod and being an interface in the pod. And
Okay, I get that. I guess from a VOLTHA requirement, I'm looking at, as you go through this, I'm trying to understand what are the requirements for VOLTHA, what are the requirements for this management system, whether it's an M or whatever, and try to differentiate that. And so, like, that one thing that being able to do a rolling upgrade of profiles may have requirement implications on VOLTHA. And I think, at least from my perspective, I need to go through this and discern where I see some of that separation. I mean, you talked about an interface per pod, and I'm like, well, is it per pod? I'm still working through that in my mind. Is it per pod, or is this kind of a part of the NEM, the global management system, or even a local management system in terms of OSAM type of stuff? Where does that fit? I just don't know.
Well, we can talk about OSAM or LOSAM or whatever, and so maybe the management application is a piece of LOSAM, but I would like LOSAM to be maybe the management application is a plug-in to LOSAM or something like that. The LOSAM for me should be at a higher level than getting into the details of what VOLTHA is doing. And this management application is a bridge from a generic type of interface into the details of what VOLTHA is doing. I would like to think that LOSAM is sitting at a higher level and not having to figure out all these dynamic connections and all these dynamic layers or whatever. And it's sitting at a higher level. Now, maybe this management application is a plug-in to LOSAM that is the VOLTHA specific implementation or the VOLTHA specific management implementation of LOSAM, or maybe it's a plug-in to NEMS that says this is the VOLTHA specific plug-in of managing something in NEMS. I would like those things to stay more abstract than getting into the details of, this is how I figure out my device ID. This is how I figure out which technology profile I'm going to use. This is how I figure out how I'm going to set, these things. It's very, very Volta specific. And I'm trying to just, with this management application, give it a very clean upstream interface and not get into the details of Volta.
Right. I guess I see it as Volta specific. I agree, because it's mapping to technology profile, but I also see it something that you likely want to manage globally from an operation standpoint. In other words, I want my technical profile ID 10 probably to be the same thing all across my deployment. Not this technology profile is 10 on this Volta pod, but on this other Volta pod, it's the same technical profile, but it's 11, right? And so there's going to be this global ID space that's going to be managed or per deployment, and the mapping between residential and those IDs are also likely going to be global, just to keep your deployment simple and easier to troubleshoot. And so there is this concept above a pod in my mind where this fits in.
Right, and also the complexity of doing a modification to a technology profile was something that we thought maybe we don't want to take on, at least initially, and maybe you're just allowed to create a new one and delete the old one or something like that. But,
yeah.
That's covered here. That's covered here. If I pushed a new one down and I moved my service type identifier, that basically is saying I was using profile number 1 before as my residential service, and now I'm using profile number 2 as my residential service. That means I need to go update anybody that was using profile number 1 to use profile number 2. Now, if you want to exclude the case of I'm going to edit profile number 1, that's okay. But I still, if I need to make a change, if there's a bug in the technology profile that is not performing the way we need it to perform, I need to be able to push that new data down into the hardware and have it perform the way we want it to.
And what we've seen
whether that's editing profile number 1, or whether that's creating profile number 2 and assigning it that service type, I need a mechanism to accomplish that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that requirement. What the issue we've really seen is kind of a development timeline issue more than anything else. No one's saying that we don't need to manage that change capability, but if I look at Volta's development history, it's always been, hey, let's figure out how we can create. Okay, now we've got the create down. Let's figure out how we can delete. We still haven't got all the deletes down, right? So if we look at prioritization, it's how can we get a profile assigned and used, step 1. We haven't even got that step 1 to a place where it's stable. So I agree with the requirement that we need to do with change. The question is, based on the number of resources and time and priority, where do we focus? And so it might be that, hey, this first 2.0 release, we were able to say, we can assign a technology profile, but you can't change it, because that's what we've got developed so far. And I think that's going to, as we look at sprints and timelines, that's where that's going to kind of get fleshed out.
Yeah. We bite off the things we can bite off, and we accomplish the things we can accomplish. It doesn't necessarily change the user stories or the use cases, but yeah, we have a finite amount of resources and a finite amount of time, and we'll get done what we can get done.
Hey, Mike.
And
on this slide, the technology type, right? The goal for if everybody is just deploying XGS PON, the goal for the technology profile is the 3 of them you listed here should be all sharing the same technology profile type. What I'm saying is,
I don't think so. I don't think that's true. I think a Tibet will have a different technology profile than an edge core. I don't think the technology profile will be the same.
So we're over time, so we are going to need to defer the discussion. I don't know if we need to schedule another session later, or if it can continue over Volta to discuss. I think in the concept of what we've been looking at so far with Volta, that Sean's correct, that those devices you had would all be XGS PON technology. So if there's something else we're looking at, then I think that needs some further discussion with the group. But we are out of time today.
Well, then it may just be that I don't have the right name yet, but I think the Pivot technology profile will be different than the EdgeCore technology profile. I just think it will be.
Even for the same access technology.
It's operator specific, really, not, you know, OLT specific, I think.
I mean, the idea is that if there's something OLT specific, then we need to, if we need to accommodate, we definitely can think about that. But right now, at this point, let's assuming the technology profile should be device agnostic, right? So that's the goal. You know, it's the device. Yeah, it's device vendor agnostic. But I mean, Mike, that's definitely something we need to investigate.
Well, that was not what was presented. I mean, well, maybe I mean, there was a very small set of the things that Pivot did in some of those pictures back from February, and there was a larger set of things that EdgeCore did. You're saying that it takes the same whole technology profile.
Pardon me? Did someone try to say?
No, that's.
What I'm trying to say is, you know, because we're going to publish this deck, right? So I just want to make it clear, so aligned up with the 2.0 initiative. So let's assuming it's agnostic of the device. Okay, so Julie, back to you.
Okay, so we're out of time. So I think my last thing I will do is just, I won't even switch back to my screen here. We'll just wrap up the call today. I'll stop the recording, and then that will be it for today. So I'm trying to stop.